You are listening to the Battle Born Libertarian podcast, the official podcast of the Libertarian Party of Nevada. Here's your host, Tyus France.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning into the Battle Born Libertarian podcast. I'm your host, Tyus France. This is the official podcast of the Libertarian Party of Nevada. My favorite party to visit. Just a great party to be at. Who likes to party? This guy. So it is the fastest growing party in the state, political party. I think it's also the fastest growing political party in the country, but the person that will probably know that better than anybody else in this room is going to be my co-host sitting across from me. Alex, thank you for being here.
Thanks. Love to be here, Tyus.
Are we the fastest growing political party in the country?
By voter registration, absolutely.
Love it. You're the guy that knows all of that stuff for some reason. I would be lost. I'd just be spouting out random facts that are inaccurate. Alternative facts, if you will.
Alternative facts. We'll have to thank Miss Conway for that one.
You know, without that, what would we have? The myth that came before it. So on our last episode, we were covering misconceptions or stereotypes that people have about the Libertarian Party. Of course, we went long on it. We predicted we were going to go long on it because if there's one thing you can count on, it's that if you put a mic in front of us, we're going to go nuts. So on this one, we're going to finish up that list. So if you haven't heard the last episode, cover it or check it out because we talk about libertarians being considered pot-smoking hippies, isolationists, how we don't care about the poor, racism and discrimination, and religion. We covered all of that in one podcast. By the way, we do care about the poor. So on today, we're going to wrap up that list, and we're going to start off with the myth that libertarians are all anarchists. So there's a lot of people think of anarchists, they think Mad Max and the Thunderdome. They think of these, what are they called, utopian futures? What?
Utopian?
No, the opposite of utopian.
Atopian?
Sure, atopian.
Something like that. I don't know. I actually don't know.
Dystopian.
Dystopian, yes.
They think of these dystopian futures, and they think of anarchy. That's what anarchy looks like. Well, there are a lot of libertarians who are anarchists. It seems unlikely. They often refer to themselves as anarcho-capitalists. And the reason that capitalist part on there is really, really important. The idea there is the Mad Max and the Thunderdome type anarchy is all about basically taking what you want from whoever you want, while a capitalist really deals in fair trade. So I give somebody something that I feel is less valuable than what they're willing to exchange it for. They are exchanging goods. And that's why they consider themselves anarcho-capitalists. Then there's another part of another large group of libertarians that are considered minarchists. So a minarchist is just looking for a smaller government. The truth is, both sides of that coin are smaller government. All we're talking about there is the extent of how much smaller they want that government to be. Many times the line is drawn with they want the government only to handle civil defense, national defense, and courts. That's a fine definition. But the truth is, you might have a slightly different definition. If somebody were to run for office and they were the only one saying they were going for a smaller government, I'm going to vote for them even if I'm an anarchist because that is what I think. I think the government should have less power, especially over people's freedoms. So it doesn't really matter if a lot of libertarians are anarchists or minarchists. What I can say for a fact is that they're not all anarchists, but they exist. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we have. I think the very first meeting I went to, one of the people went, "Well, I'm an anarchist," and I was like, "I'm cool with that. Like that doesn't bother me that you have that. I think I'd probably consider myself more on the anarchist scale, but I don't think that that's a reasonable thing to consider we're going to get to overnight. So you might as well go for a smaller government."
One of the important things about the Libertarian Party is the big tent philosophy. You'll hear that a lot. And the idea is that, you know, instead of having so our party platform is minarchist by definition, which means that we want limited government, particularly small, barely can see it federal and state governments with, if there is a somewhat larger government, it's local. It's something that you could move down the street and be away from it. You can run someone against that person successfully, and it's not $1 billion race, billion with a B. Oh, but yeah, it's just.
So you're saying that ideally, the people that should have the most power over me are the ones that are closest to me,
Yes.
which makes sense, right? Like, if somebody were to have a problem with me, it should be my neighbors.
Yes.
It shouldn't necessarily be somebody in New York or in Maine when I'm in Las Vegas.
And in anarchy, basically, the anarcho-capitalists are saying that if there is a government, it should be completely voluntary, and it should be run basically by the people who want to have one, and there's no imposing of will. There's no collective imposition of will. And so what we did is we said, you know what? Instead of the anarcho-capitalists or anarchists having their own party, help us. We're going in the same direction. Smaller government. And we like to depict it as like a train that's traveling toward anarchy heaven. And I don't know why I said that, but it seemed fitting. But basically, libertarians are going to get off a stops few earlier than anarchists will. And so there's no reason they can't help us get limited government, ballot access mutually, and there's no reason they can't be within our own party and be part of us and help us and all of those good things. Because, again, there is no other party where you can lower government. There is no other party that's pushing for smaller national government, smaller federal government with the states, and smaller county governments. No one else is doing that. So if you wanna help us, get on board with us, even if your sub ideology is a little different.
Sure. If anarchists are ice cream and minarchists are gelato, we're all just going toward dessert. Right?
That's great.
Okay. So let's move on to the next one, which is that libertarians is basically just a different name for a Republican. Oh my God, how offended am I just at reading that sentence? So, no. Wrong. Super wrong.
Yes.
So, okay, here's probably where that comes from. I want to justify where somebody might come up with that assumption. That probably comes from the idea that the two-party system has been so powerful for such a long time that people that have had some libertarian values have often run on the Republican ticket just so that they would have a chance. That's probably the wrong move. And that's probably the wrong move specifically because it's going to perpetuate a two-party system forever. So ultimately, if you want different ideas, you shouldn't put them under the umbrella of somebody else's idea that you don't align with. And there are a lot of things about a very conservative side of stuff that we don't align with. Specifically, now financially, oftentimes we're in alignment. We're very fiscally conservative. We don't want to spend a lot of money on wars, foreign aid, Social Security stuff, things like that. We're not really interested in that. We think the free market can handle it, and so there is alignment with that. But on a lot of social issues, we couldn't be farther away from what Republicans often value. Do you want to cover some of that?
Sure. In fact, I like to tell my Democrat friends that we're more liberal than they are. And the reason is because they say things like common sense immigration reform, and we just say open borders, right? Why? And again, it gets back to our free market roots too. We want there to be a free flow of labor capital coming across the borders. That way, people with lower job skills can move where those are needed. People with higher job skills can move where those job skills are needed. And that way, if manufacturing moves down to Brazil, there's no reason that we couldn't have U.S. citizens going down there to get a really high-paying manufacturing job, and then coming back to the States 3 months out of every year or something. I mean, it's silly that we've limited ourselves to only the jobs available in some arbitrarily decided border, through war long time ago.
What are some of the other social issues that we might be even more liberal on?
I would say marriage. Even the Democrats just 6 years ago were saying they were anti-gay marriage. They were saying pro-civil unions, and so our idea is that the government shouldn't be involved in marriage whatsoever, because marriage is between you and whatever religious icons or sentiments you have. Basically, it's not something the government should have a part of. And so if you would like to marry multiple people, if you would like to marry one person, if you want to marry the same gender, different gender, if you want to, however you would like to do it, that should be your freedom to do. And there's still Democrats who are uncomfortable, and other liberals who are uncomfortable with the idea of polyamory or open marriages or any of this sort of thing. And we just don't, it's not that we don't care about the people, but we don't care about what you choose to do with your life. If you want to enter into a voluntary contract with someone like marriage is supposed to be, then that's all it should be. And it's you saying that you get the right to decide if I live or die, if I'm incapacitated. You get the right to decide, you get the right to my money and possessions when I pass away. That's sort of the things that marriage gets at from a contractual standpoint. So, and again, liberals still have a hard time with some of these ideas where I might have one person who gets to decide when to pull the plug and someone else who inherits my money. They just, they're almost old-fashioned in the sense that you have to have just that one-on-one. Something else. If you want to jump in here.
Bring it.
Something else is drugs, right? Democrats have continued to perpetuate and push the pedal to the metal on the drug war when, even in its inception, the Libertarian Party recognized that criminalizing drugs is absolutely the wrong move. All it's done is it's sent people who were otherwise well-adjusted adults in society to prison and then slap them with things like felonies where they'd never be able to again reintegrate into society. They lose the right to vote. They lose their rights to work where they want to work because most people discriminate against felons openly. No one cares about that. But we do. And so I would say to anyone who's listening that if you think we're like Republicans, when's the last time you heard of a Republican that would defend your right to cross into this America, marry who you want, including men if you're a man or women if you're a woman, and use whatever drugs you want? I mean, that's just, to me, completely 180 from what we see from social conservatives in the Republican Party. And this has been a part of, this isn't new. This isn't like, oh, the Libertarian Party's gotten too liberal for me now. This has been part of our platform since 1972, our inception. And it's just that some people have not chosen to recognize our more socially liberal side to the platform. And, Libertarian Party of Nevada, we acknowledge both. We're going to work with actual fiscal conservatives, which there aren't many left in the Republican Party. But the ones that are left, they voted for that commerce tax that was so bad. So that's why I say that. The 2% on gross profits from businesses, terrible. And so what social conservatives are left, what fiscal conservatives are left, we want to work with them on those issues, and we want to work with social liberals on the issues where we align. But we're not going to change our party, and we haven't significantly changed our platform since our inception in 1972. So, we're not the one that's changing. I think that it's actually that America is becoming more libertarian. We're relaxing drug laws all over the country. We're relaxing marriage laws all over the country. Interracial marriage used to be banned. So, look at how far we've come in the 50 years nearly since the inception of the Libertarian Party. And so, I just, it irks me that people would lump us in as the, estranged cousins of the Republican Party when the reason that we're not in the Republican Party is because we're at least 50% of the platform that not only we disagree with them, but we think it's abhorrent that they would believe that you don't have the freedom to travel where you want to travel. You don't have the freedom to work where you want to work. You don't have the freedom to do with your body what you'd like. You don't have the freedom to marry the one you love. How dare they?
This is really where I became a libertarian. I was raised in a family of liberals, which is kind of a hijacked word from freedom is what it's about, right? So the word liberal comes from liberty, which is about freedom. And I loved that idea. I thought, people should be able to do what they want with whoever they want or whatever they want as long as they own it and they're not hurting somebody else,
and
right?
It's voluntary.
Yeah, that seems so easy. That's an easy thing to get on. And then what ended up happening is among that group, though, I would ignore really the financial stuff. I just wouldn't get into it. Maybe economics was difficult for me, or I just couldn't get my brain around it, or maybe I wanted to ignore something that we were really wrong about, and then I would we demonized the Republicans and said, like, oh, you know what, they don't want to let people have these freedoms of being able to marry whoever they want, or have a drug or whatever. And that was really my viewpoint until somebody said, you know what, this is not about left and right. This is about more freedom or less freedom, and you have to understand that where one side grants somebody more social freedom, they give the people the right to do what they want, but they give them almost or very, very little right to have what they want. They have almost no say what they do with their money. They're taxed. They want to increase those taxes, and they want to continue to use everybody's money for everybody else. And that's not freedom either. So on one side of it, I was like, oh, I like this freedom side, but you know what? Freedom is not really granted in this party either. So then I started looking at the other end of it. And ultimately, libertarianism became incredibly consistent because it wasn't about left or right. It was about freedom or less free, or tyranny, I guess, is the opposite, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say we are the opposite of Republicans. I can understand why some people might get that misinterpretation, but we're very, very far from being a Republican party. In fact, I think we are one of the few parties that are consistent around that messaging. Let's move on to the next one, which is libertarians don't use morals. They only use economic principles.
We don't have morals?
Yeah, so essentially the idea here is that all of our arguments are based off of the economic principles of things. So we go, you know what, if we want to drive prices down for the poor, we do that based off of looking at fair market and the impact that taxation and regulation has, rather than looking at the moral standpoint of it.
I see. And perhaps just to clarify, so morals, from my understanding, is about how you believe and how you treat, right? But ethics, I think, is how you treat other people. Are these people saying that we don't have our own sense of morals? We don't have a moral grounding?
Well, I think
we're just floating through space with no
there
sense
is a difference between morals and ethics. However, I think it's pretty interchangeable here in that context.
So they're saying we have neither. That we just go back to the free market every time, and we don't actually care about anyone.
Yeah, I think they look at us. I'm guessing based off of that assumption that they look at us as like robots, right? So we're programmed like, okay, our job is to make prices less. Must compute how to make prices less. That's what we do. You and I both know that this is insane.
That is insane. I haven't heard that one before, but I can see how it's true. I mean, a lot of people's decision to stay out of the Libertarian Party has to do with the idea that we don't share their values.
I wonder if this comes down to a communication error that we've made. Maybe.
I think so. Maybe it is maybe this one is more on our ability to market than it is on, because I can see how people would perceive that we're just this heartless, robotic, almost, as you said, dispatcher of free market justice, but it's not really about helping people, But it is. I mean, I want to be clear that the reason that we're dispatching this free market justice is because we believe that is going to help the most people, and it's going to give them the most help. It's going to maximize assisting other people. It's going to create a better world, a more free world, a world where the job that you want exists, and that you have plenty of money and food on the table, and it's not being dumped out by the government on some farmland because they're trying to keep milk prices high.
Yeah, perhaps the issue here is that we have a solution to ethical problems, and we've addressed those ethics in our head so long ago that we've ended up finding a solution. So when somebody brings a problem to us, we give them the solution to the problem long before aligning emotionally with the emotions that they're dealing with. Perhaps we need to empathize a little earlier and more, so that this is not happening. We're taking ownership of a misconception here. But let me explain. We absolutely have morals. So and ethics and guidelines that
the NAP. I mean, it's a guiding principle to libertarianism. The idea that we are not going to aggress against other people. We're not going to force other people to do what we not that we're against individual applications of force. I mean, obviously, we all walk around.
When you say NAP, what are we talking about? We're talking about
the non-aggression principle.
Yes.
Sorry. For those of you who are listening and don't know, that is a guiding principle to most libertarians, not all, certainly. And basically, it says that you won't force other people to do something.
So when you were a little kid, you probably heard the golden rule, which is, you do unto others as you want to have done unto you, which is a really fantastic rule. And I think most people can agree with that, right? But there's the other side of that. That's the happy side, that you want to be nice to people so that they're nice to you and vice versa. Well, there's the other side of that where if somebody hurts you, that is the only time when you could defend or aggress back against them. So the non-aggression principle is the opposite side of the golden rule, where basically you don't cause harm to any person, with the exception of if they cause harm to you. So if somebody comes up to you to fight you, you have the right to defend yourself. And you might even have the right to go even a little bit further to make sure that person has to stop, right? So the non-aggression principle is very, very, I think it's an incredibly moral stance.
Yes, I think that you could
rights.
almost discuss this as an entire ethics class topic on the non-aggression principle and how it can apply to day-to-day interactions with other people. And so but again, I think that the perception here is probably what people are getting at, not the reality. The reality is that libertarians, the only reason that we're even organizing is so that we're a group of people who don't want other people telling us what to do. And it's not that we just don't want people telling us what to do, but we don't want people telling you what to do. Everyone's always on the wrong end of the mob. I mean, if you think about it that way, there's some area of your life where you're on the wrong end of the mob, and we're trying to stop that mob from being able to do whatever it wants to you just because it's a majority. And whether that's because you're on the wrong end of a lynch mob and you're black, or you're on the wrong end of a homophobic mob and you're gay, regardless of what reason is stated for the aggression, we're on your side. We're on the side of the individual. We're on the side of your right to peacefully coexist without any kind of interference from other people. And as long as you respect that as well, we don't have a problem.
Yeah. A couple of the things that I would say are moral stances for libertarians is that of natural rights, which basically state that you have the right, or you have the freedom around your body and the right to it. You have the freedom around your actions and what results from that. So if you work, you deserve the pay that you make from that job, and you have the right to keep your property. So basically, that life, liberty, and property thing, where our Declaration of Independence, I think, was said, where they had life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, was a little modification.
Sure. Well, it was restated, right? It was in the Declaration of Independence, and then it was slightly restated in the preamble.
Yeah.
For the pursuit of happiness as opposed to property, but property is your pursuit of happiness. So, I mean, again, those foundational to all of those is liberty, right? If you have life and you have the freedom to pursue and do with your life what you choose, and you don't have the right of other people to tell you how to live your life and what to do, so long as it doesn't interfere with other people.
Well, I think this one dovetails very nicely with our next little myth, which is that libertarians are utopians who are deluded to think that all people are good. I understand where they get this as well, because we say people should have the right to do whatever they want. I can understand how you can make the assumption there that we are assuming that everyone is going to do the right thing. And that's simply not true. I don't think that everyone's going to do the right thing, because if I thought they were going to do the right thing, I just think they're going to do everything I do. I just assume that what I'm doing is the best thing possible, and therefore anybody who's doing something different than me is doing something wrong. The truth is, we don't really care. It's much easier to get out of the way. And going back to the non-aggression principle, if you don't hurt anybody, it's much easier to get out of the way than for me or the government or a group of people, which is all that a government really is, for them to try and control somebody. So I can understand where you might say, "Oh yeah, we just think everybody has good intentions." No, I think people have bad intentions. I think there are people out there that are murderers and rapists and terrible people. I don't think there's a ton of them percentage-wise, and I do think that people are doing the very best they can, and sometimes they make mistakes. But the truth is, I don't even know how to manage my own life. I'm doing the very best I can. It's pretty irresponsible for me to say that I would know how to manage your life and everybody else's life too.
Absolutely. And to say that everyone's good is silly, because we believe in a robust national defense. If we thought everyone was good, then we would see a reason for a national defense.
Now, when you say a robust national defense, are you saying the size of the military is where it should be, or are you saying...
From our defensive capabilities, I think that that's fine, but it's our offensive capabilities that really irk me. And so I have no problem with us having... You know what? I don't even think we should close a single base in the States. But look at how many we have outside of the States. That's where I have an issue. And I think that, several libertarian authors have really penned the difference between the two, right? One is about national defense and about protecting the citizens of the United States who pay for this collective military versus, meddling and being the policeman of the world. The big stick diplomacy, that to us is the very worst policy decision that was ever made in the 20th century, because it precipitated our involvement in a number of conflicts that weren't ours to police and that we had no right to get into until our allies were attacked. And when that happened, that's a different story. I mean, obviously, I think we should defend and protect our alliances. That's a contractual relationship that we've made with another country for mutual defense. And I have no issues with those, and I don't think libertarians generally do either. And the other thing is that we're not anti-police. Do we think the police should be, that they need to be reined in? Yes. Do we think that they've made mistakes? Yeah. And I don't think that they should be lesser punished simply because they're police. But that doesn't mean we want no police.
Or courts.
Or courts. In fact, I would say the branch that is the least bloated and terrible right now is the judicial branch. I would say it goes executive, then legislative, then judicial. Honestly, the court system is doing the very best job of any of the three branches of government right now, and they're the ones defending liberties most staunchly.
But all three of those, we're not necessarily opposed to those things, and those things are in place specifically because not all people are great.
Yeah. We wouldn't
it's a
even
great
need
point.
a government, right? We wouldn't even need a government if everyone was good and we didn't need any kind of mutual defense. Now, I know I have, for you anarcho-capitalists that are listening, that's my own personal opinion. And I know that I've heard many very convincing arguments that private security is all you really need. You don't need a police. And I think that that's fair too.
But even that argument is still an argument for security.
Yes.
So there's no delusion that there are challenging people out there, that there's conflicts that are going to arise, that defense is a necessity. There's no delusion.
Well, why else would we so staunchly defend gun rights? I mean, if everyone was good, no one would need a gun. You wouldn't. No one would ever come and attack you. I mean, you might only need weapons if you're going up against wild animals.
That's a great point.
Now you really don't deal with those in the city.
Okay, let's move on to our next one.
All right.
Libertarians, gosh, these are getting worse. Libertarians hate old people because of social security.
Oh my God! Yes, we rally every week for anti-old people.
Yeah, it's a challenging campaign because they vote.
And in larger numbers than anyone else.
Okay, so here's probably where this comes from. Yes, it's true. We're anti-social security. And there's a lot of economic reasons for that. But maybe after learning the lessons of the emotional defense, maybe we need to talk about the emotions behind that. Mm-hmm. We care not only about old people, but about young people, minorities, majorities. The truth is, it's really easy to care about all people when you bring it down to the person as the smallest common denominator there. Then it doesn't matter about age or race or gender or anything else. So I deeply care about old people. But, no, I shouldn't say but. And I think that the best way for us to take care of our elderly, or maybe the word incompetent is not the nicest word to use, but those who cannot take care of themselves, is through charity, which we've discussed in our previous episode. I think that's a fantastic way. If we all had personal responsibility around the fact that we know that we have to take care of ourselves, suddenly the way we invest is going to change. And if we didn't tax people throughout their entire life, perhaps they would have a lot more money.
They would. I mean, not even perhaps, right? I mean, 25% income tax, something like 5 to 10% payroll taxes. I mean,
It's the most money you're going to spend in your life is going to be spent toward the government.
yes, and it's a Ponzi scheme. It's even worse. So Social Security is particularly heinous because people pay into it their whole life, and that money's not sitting in an account somewhere waiting for them, growing interest. If you had a defined contribution plan, like a 401k or something of that nature, it would be waiting for you. Your money would be sitting there waiting for you, but you're not going to see a penny of that because there's no money left in the Social Security fund. It has been robbed blind by Congress, and all the money that's going into it right now is being immediately dispersed into the pockets of old people, and they paid into that system.
Yeah, but the only way to continue that is to increase the population constantly.
Yes.
So it's unsustainable.
And that's why it's a Ponzi scheme, is eventually the musical chairs stop. And for those who don't know, a Ponzi scheme is when you get new investors. It's sort of like a pyramid shape where, the people who get in on the early part of the investment, they see really good returns. So they see all of their friends go and tell their friends to invest. And eventually what happens is you just keep building a bigger and bigger group of people below who they put on all their money. And so that's how you fund all of the big returns for the people who are in earlier. But eventually you get to a point where the number of people investing is so low and you're not adding to that next layer enough that it all collapses. It's all because there's no real money left. You're giving one person's money to someone else and making it look like everyone's growing.
Okay, let's move on to the last one of our list, which is libertarians want mega corporations to control everything. So we want this giant Walmart to run everything, to take over because we're so pro giant company. Let's first address why somebody might have that belief.
Probably because we're always talking about, business and free market economics and how they're going to solve everything and how some of these larger corporations can do good, like Apple, you mentioned earlier.
Lowering taxes on these companies. We talk about that. So I can see where people might come from with that.
But we're anti-corporate welfare, and that's what these people are receiving. This is not your mama's welfare, as they like to say. This is big government bailouts when companies like banks, for example, really good one, or automobile manufacturers, the reason that they didn't go out of business and get replaced by smaller, more competitive manufacturers is because we bailed them out. We, the government, bailed them out. Yeah. It's awful. And so they have no incentive not to repeat the crisis of 2008 because, well, gosh, it worked out so well. I mean, they took the risk. The taxpayers footed the bill at the time, and they can continue to make risky investments with taxpayers' money. And even if they pay it back, we're not the social safety net for the big banks. We shouldn't be afraid to let big banks fail and get replaced by smaller regional banks, credit unions like teachers' credit unions and things like that. Nevada State Bank. These are banks that didn't mess up, didn't need bailouts, and continued to operate all the way through the crisis. And those are the ones that should have been rewarded with this business, not Chase Bank, not Bank of America. So it's kind of frustrating, that, we're anti the government interfering, and the government's what's creating these huge monopolies, right? Patent law, another way that the government is ensuring that there's no such thing as generics for at least 25 years in some cases.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can see where people go, okay, libertarians want Walmart to have to pay less in taxes or not have to pay a minimum wage. But where you might be missing the point there, if whoever has this belief, is that we're doing that not for Walmart. We're doing that for everybody else. We're doing that for everybody. In fact, it's the big companies that are actually lobbying the government to get these regulations passed. And the reason they're lobbying the government to pass regulations that you would think would hurt them is because it prevents competition.
It hurts their competitors more.
Yeah. So they're capable of surviving through challenging times. They're not actually even opposed to creating those challenging times for themselves because their competitors can't survive those challenging times. So while they might be able to pay $15 an hour per employee because they're an enormous corporation that already has the infrastructure in place, it stops other companies from getting that infrastructure in place.
And so it hurts small and local business more than anything.
Yep. So yes, we are interested in taxing companies less and deregulating these companies, but we're not doing it for the giant company. We're doing it for the mom and pop. We're doing it so that you can start your own business. We're doing it so that competition can flourish in the country.
Yeah, we were doing it so that I could start selling cookies tomorrow and not have to have a business license and regulations and food handlers licenses and all of these things that go along with the government. I mean, we say it often, but the government seems to cause the problems that everyone's trying to solve. And
so true.
It's almost like a patient that has been put on so many drugs that they're interacting with each other so badly that you have to keep adding drugs, or you think you should have to keep adding drugs to see what's happening. But there's something that doctors will do every once in a while, and that is they'll take them off everything. And of course, there'll be withdrawal and there'll be all kinds of issues. They take them off everything to see if, gosh, maybe it was just that first medication that caused the problems that needed the second and the third. I like to think that that's the government, right? They solved the first problem or perceived problem, which led to other problems, and then they tried to solve those, it's like whack-a-mole for the government.
Yeah. We just have our eye on the wrong target. We target these large companies and we say the large companies are the problem. And I'm not going to say that they're not in bed with the problem, but these large companies they all have one common denominator that is letting them do all the evil things that they're doing. And that common denominator is that they're using the government to their advantage.
And the government's the biggest corporation of all.
Yeah, they're the corporation that has the exclusive use of force. So they are going to charge you whether the product is good or whether the product is bad. So the issue there is you don't have to necessarily be upset at the big companies. You don't have to be upset at the small companies. What you should be upset at is whatever organization is letting them be corrupt. And there is one that is providing that crony capitalism. And there's one party that is working very hard to reduce the power of that terrible, terrible company, which is your government. So let's wrap it up. Alex, where can our listeners find you?
Best place and easiest place to find me is on facebook.com/alexmd.liberty.
Love it. If you want to find me, you can track me down at my website, tyusfrance.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at tyusfrance. You can email us at podcast@lpnevada.org. lpnevada.org is where you can visit to find out what we're doing, our social events, how you can get involved, and believe it or not, we really, really want you to get involved. So please show up, become part of our party, or just let your voice be heard. In the meantime, share the podcast with those who you love that are like-minded or that are differently minded. That's even better. Until next time, make it all about freedom.
This show is brought to you by the Libertarian Party of Nevada. Music is provided by T. Sims. Please support the show by subscribing, sharing it with friends, and leaving a positive review on iTunes. For more information or to learn how to get involved, visit lpnevada.org. Thank you for listening.